Okay, on this warm-up number 1 for Unit 2B, we were asked to solve each one of these equations to put it in the form y equals mx plus b. The steps for doing this are the same every single time. The first step will be to move the x term to the other side of the equation. In order to do this, you will either have to add or subtract. You will make sure to do the opposite of what you see. So in my first problem, x is on this side of the equation and I just want y over here. That means I have to move x to the other side of the equation. Whenever he jumps over the equal sign, his sign has to change. So I have to subtract x on both sides. So the x's will cancel and I will bring down what I have left on this side. Notice that I circled the negative in front of the y. So I have negative y equals, the x term will go first, and since he has a subtraction sign in front of him, when I write him on this side, I have to write the subtraction sign first. 10 is a positive number because he doesn't have a sign in front of him. That means he's positive. So when I write him, I have to write a positive 10. But we're not done, because if you look at slope-intercept form, the y is always positive. My y is negative, which means there's still a number in front of the y that I need to get rid of. Hence the second step. You will always divide all of your terms, every single term, by the number that is in front of y. So in my example, I have an imaginary 1, and since there's a minus sign in front of it, that makes it a negative 1. So in order to get y by itself, I have to divide this side by negative 1, and that means I have to divide each term by negative 1. So the great thing about negative 1 is he doesn't change any of the numbers, he just goes through and changes their sign. So negative and negative make this a positive y. The negative 1 next to the x divided by a negative 1, two negatives give me a positive x with an imaginary 1 in front of it. 10 divided by a negative 1 gives me negative 10. I have just solved this equation for y. Now it looks like y equals mx plus b. So if I were to graph it, I would know that my m is the number that's in front of x, which is that imaginary 1. When graphing, you need it to be a fraction, so any whole number I can put a 1 underneath it to make it a ratio. B is the number that's at the end, and you have to be careful that you get the sign. So when I graph this, I'd have to start at a negative 10 because there's a minus sign in front of the 10, making him negative. So I would start with B and I would use my m to move. Now I need to solve this equation for y also. So let's remember our steps. The first step is to move x, and I will add or subtract. So when I look at the 2x, it is positive right now. So to move it, his sign has to change, and I will subtract 2x on both sides. I circle this term so that I make sure I don't lose the sign that's in front of it. The 4y is negative, so when I bring it down, I write it as negative 4y equals, because these two x's canceled, and the only thing that's left on that side is the negative 4y. On this side, I will write the negative 2x first, because in slope-intercept, the x term is written first, and the number, which is b, is written at the end of the problem. So since 8 is positive, I put plus 8. Now I still need to do the second step and divide every term by the number that's in front of y. Since there is a negative 4 in front of y, I get rid of it by dividing by negative 4. But if I divide this side by negative 4, I have to also divide this side and every single term on this side by negative 4. Negative 4 divided by negative 4 gives me the invisible 1. So I'll just write y. Negative 1 divided by negative 2, two negatives will give me a positive, and if you simplify 2 over 4, you get the fraction 1/2. X is located next to that term. So I simplified by taking 2 and dividing it into itself. 2 divided by 2 gave me 1, and I have to divide the denominator by 2 also. So 4 divided by 2 gave me 2. If you have a calculator at home, the TI-30X, you can simply put in fraction form, negative 2 divided by negative 4, and it will change it into a fraction for you. So the last part is to divide a positive 8 by a negative 4. That will give me a negative 2. So I have written this equation in slope-intercept form, where my m is 1/2, because that is the number that is next to x, and my b is negative 2, because that is the number that's at the end, and b is located at the end. So I'm going to clear the board so that I have enough space to work the last two examples. Now, continuing with the same steps that we have over here, I first need to move x by either adding or subtracting. My x term is 6x and it is positive, so I will subtract 6x on both sides. So remember, the side where you did the opposite, it will cancel because one is positive and one is negative. So when I bring down this sign, I have to bring down a negative 3y equals, remember we write the x term first, and since the sign in front of it is negative, I write negative 6x. The 9 is positive, so I write it as plus 9. Now I need to do step 2 and divide every term by the number that's in front of y. So I divide every term by negative 3 because that is the number that is in front of y. So negative 3 divided by negative 3 will give me the invisible 1 coefficient that we don't show. So y equals negative 6 divided by a negative 3. Two negatives will give me a positive, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. X. 9 divided by a negative 3 gives me a negative 3. So I have just solved this equation for y. I'm ready to graph. M is equal to 2, and since we need the slope to be a fraction to graph, I will put a 1 underneath it. B is equal to negative 3. So when I graph, I'll start with negative 3 and I'll rise 2 and run 1 in order to graph my new point from B. Thank you so much for reviewing this warm-up so that you can prepare for the test. Have a great day.